From Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where you meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, and theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home at what we affectionately call upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and this is a very special Inwood Film Festival Artist Spotlight episode featuring the post-screening conversation, which followed the award-winning documentary Minted with Nicholas Bruckman. When the artist known as Beeple shatters records by selling a digital artwork for $69 million, it ignites a global NFT phenomenon that transforms the lives of artists around the world. But they must reckon with the controversies that threaten to collapse this wild and controversial new frontier. For those not familiar with NFTs or have not seen the film, enjoy this trailer of the film, which will no doubt leave you wanting to find out more about this phenomenon and the story that Nicholas tells. Directly following, you'll hear our candid interview from the 2025 Inwood Film Festival following the presentation of the film. Enjoy Minted.
We're watching the closing of the auction, which closes in an hour, and it's already at absolutely ridiculous amounts.
NFT.
People are paying tens of millions of dollars.
Oh my God!
$69 million.
I think it's completely insane.
I didn't think that could be sold for any amount of money.
What is an NFT?
It's not just for digital art. It's like this could be for anything. Up until NFTs, I was barely able to pay rent or buy food.
$900,000.
I'm about to cry.
My first piece sold for $30,000, which was a lot for a 15-year-old.
In Nigeria, we've been told growing up, you can't be an artist.
But I've sold NFTs to over 20 collectors.
Los NFTs me dieron el primer impulso para liberarme de Cuba.
I think traditional art is still quite skeptical about NFTs.
This is not respectable art.
I just bought a Beeple. It's like $65,000.
It could certainly be a bubble. That's fun. It's really cool.
Everyone gets an NFT too.
FTX collapsed this week after a chain reaction.
This started as a digital art movement, but it transformed into one of the largest financial collapses in American history.
The NFT market had become the greater fool theory.
Everyone just got annihilated. It's someone's life you're playing with, and someone's emotions and expressions. You have to be kind of crazy to trade NFTs.
$500,000, one click, all gone.
This was old school fraud.
What gives Van Gogh value? What gives the Jackson Pollock value? It's got to be a new idea that changes the way people think about art. And I'm trying to do that. We'll see 100 years from now if I've done it.
Let's hear it for Nicholas Bruckman. By the time we finish this interview, the credits might end.
A lot of people worked on this. It takes a village.
It takes a village.
Also, it takes a village to run a film festival.
It really is a privilege to have Nicholas here. And so Nicholas is a documentary filmmaker. He can tell you about. Would you mind telling a bit about your background, where you're from, where you live, and what you do?
I grew up in a little neighborhood at the north tip of Manhattan called Inwood. Originally lived all over Manhattan. Was on the Upper West Side originally, but got priced out, and so came here in 1999 when I was 15. Went to Rock Science for high school. Lived downtown afterwards for many years, but recently had a kid and moved back to the neighborhood. So when I lived here, there was no Inwood Film Festival, and it's really amazing to come back and see everything that you built.
I knew you'd come back for this.
Yes, the reason I came back. So yeah, I went to film school at SUNY Purchase, was commuting from Inwood up there at the time.
Wow.
And,
yeah. Well, he has a studio, and so he's a documentary filmmaker. You specialize in docs.
Yeah. So I make some narrative films as well as a producer, but as a director, I don't really know how to work with actors. Let me say it this way. I
don't think anybody knows how to work with actors really.
I'll put it this way. I think the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And so a lot of the projects I've worked on have been about trying to tell underrepresented stories about real people on screen. One thing I will mention, though, is a lot of the way that I direct documentary. I try to really make films to some extent. This film is like a somewhat traditional documentary, I would say, in the sense there's a lot of experts in chairs explaining things to you. But and we just had to do it that way because there's no way to follow one. You couldn't just follow Beeple and have him explain to you what an NFT is, because he can't do it. And he maybe doesn't care, but
you've tried.
We tried, yeah. We tried to make it a more character-driven film. But what I was going to say, just broadly speaking, is that I'm really interested in documentaries that feel like narrative films. And even when I'm working with real people on the projects that I direct, I'm often kind of giving them not necessarily scripts, but like framing in which to act. So a lot of the ways I work on documentary, I think, kind of borrows from narrative filmmaking. And I think there's like a interesting blurry line between them that I'm interested in.
Well said. Where did you come across the idea to? This is a very specific subject that is particularly, I'm sure, as it comes across when you bring it up in conversation when you were first bringing it up, that you go, what? And what? NFL? And what? I mean, where did your interest come to cover this?
Yeah. So a lot of the conversations that I've been having here at the Inwood Film Festival about how do people make it and survive as an artist is really what I was interested in exploring. It wasn't this technology specifically, and what pulled me in was that I studied digital art before I got into film. I studied digital art. This is in the early 2000s, and much like Kevin McCoy, the guy who is considered to be the inventor of the NFT, says in the film, there was no such thing as buying or selling a piece of digital art, and hence there was no real economy for being a digital artist. And you couldn't, maybe you'd see a screen in a gallery. People were selling hard drives, but I studied people like Namjoon Paik is a famous video artist, Corey Archangel. These are people who were doing. I was working on projections that you could interact with. Anyway, I knew that it was a kind of a dead end, and so I got into the extremely lucrative field of documentary filmmaking instead. But I always kind of kept in touch with that world. One of the artists who I followed for a long time was Beeple, who I followed on Instagram, and Beeple actually has quite a big following even before NFTs, even though it was just normal random suburban dad. He did build up this large following, which is how he was able to get that sale. And I remember seeing in 2020 him starting to show these QR codes that he was selling for thousands of dollars. I didn't know what they were at all. And I was totally plugged into that. I am familiar with and interested in cryptocurrency in general, which is a very big and broad topic that's been covered really well in other documentaries, and we could talk about today. But right at that moment, I saw kind of the confluence of things that I was interested in, which was how can digital artists survive? Or how can artists make it? And this thing was kind of taking off like a rocket ship. I got in touch with some people who had some resources to support this project, and was out filming right time, right place.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because you kind of took it where I was hoping to lead you to, in the sense that there's, it's a very wide, can't do a documentary about blockchain, can't do a documentary about crypto or NFTs. And you focused on the people who are doing it and telling their stories, and through their, I find where this documentary drives a lot of success from is the personal stories, particularly the young lady from Cuba, with her daughter, and you have this great variety. Everybody wants the same thing, right? It's finding how can we survive, and all this, but also too, it's kind of when's it going to stop raining, and who's going to turn off the faucet? When's the water going to end? And it's a gamble, and that was a really, I think. I don't know. I have very mixed. What are your emotions on that? Because you made it. What were you thinking when you were talking to these people?
Well, there was a lot of
there's ups and downs.
Yeah, ups and downs. I mean, it was really a crazy thing to witness firsthand. Kind of from the sale with the people to being in the auction house with Justin. I mean, Justin Aversano. I think he's a great photographer and did really interesting work. But he's just a local. He's kind of like the kids I grew up with. like, pothead, like art student at SVA, and then suddenly he's selling his work, for, he put in the work, and I think his work is really great, and I think he's a great artist, but I have to say I was like, it's very hard to sell my documentaries for $1 million. So I was, there was a feeling of a mix of envy and awe seeing these artists do this. And then there was also a lot of confusion about what the story was going to be, because we couldn't make a movie about artists just getting rich forever. I mean, I sort of hoped that would happen. But at the time, it was a really strange moment for those who were plugged into this world, because it felt like another world with all these people suddenly succeeding beyond their wildest dreams. But then as soon as it started to fall apart, when the hype got too intense, that was when there was a bit of relief, in the sense that we knew there was going to be an actual story narrative making the movie about. So there was, I still felt bad that the artists struggled in this way, but I will say ultimately, and
it brought conflict.
Yeah, it brought conflict to the story. But the people we filmed with, and for the most part, I think had overall a positive transformational experience by taking this risk and jumping into this new technology.
What did any of your subjects in the film have after seeing it? Any feedback you'd like to share?
Well, one of them, just because I called it the rise and fall of the NFT, got really mad at me and was like, "What do you mean the fall? I don't want to be part of the documentary." And I was like, "Look, I always told you that we were going to do an honest and journalistic look at this." And I will say that the crypto community, which this is all adjacent to, is very passionate about cryptocurrency as an ethos. And that's what's sitting behind all of this stuff about art, is this idea that technology allows people to transact without a middleman. And I think this is actually a very powerful, fundamental idea. And this was not the case 5 years ago, even when we were shooting, but I think even now, all the people who watch this in this room and are like, what is this NFT bullshit? They kind of will admit now that a Bitcoin is a real thing and has value, and that most Fortune 500 companies hold on to it. Obviously, our current administration is very invested in it in all kinds of terrible ways. And the reality that this idea of some kind of digital string of code can be unique and have value is becoming pretty broadly accepted by very mainstream folks. And so I think it's worth considering whether that idea might apply to other things like art.
And I think I really appreciate what you said there, because when you introduce a new idea, it's foreign to begin with, so it takes a while to people adapt or not, and it has to be kicked around. And one thing that someone said towards the end of the doc there is about how artists there was a word about protection in an audience. So, unfortunately, with protection comes laws, there comes rules. And so it's not so wild west for the artist anymore. So be careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're getting at what I think is the deeper philosophical question. James Brimmelman is an IT professor at Cornell Tech on Roosevelt Island. Is one of my favorite interviews in this, because he gets at the fundamental question, which is, yes, the blockchain tools, which are essentially these computer networks, really do allow people to do things without a government, right? Without an intermediary, and that's powerful. But what he says, one of the favorite lines in the film, is governments do things that people like as well as things people don't like. And so I think this code, and this, of course, all of this is kind of a precursor to the same conversations about AI, that this is very fundamentally transformatively powerful technology, and it probably does need to be regulated in some way. And if it's going to be regulated, let's let the artists who've driven it and made it mainstream be part of that conversation and make sure the way that these technologies are used benefits them. I think that's ultimately that line that you said about protection is kind of the moral of the film, and I think it's bigger than NFTs. So
I think so.
You're a good interviewer.
Well, and I think that's also, well, thank you. I picked up on that. Yes. And also, have you paid attention to
something? You got to the heart of it for me.
I appreciate it. Well, that's what my point is. I just wanted to put the button on and open the questions. It's about storytelling. And that's the spine of the story.
Right? Yeah. And it's really about, I think, the fact that being an artist is incredibly difficult in any medium to survive. And there was this one moment where this aperture opened for 2 years for all of these artists to succeed. And whether or not and just like any other artistic movement, it got latched onto by forces of capitalism, and there's been all types of versions of this happening from the Renaissance onward, where new artistic movements have come about, and then people have said that's not real art, and then suddenly tons of money have come in, and then it all gets destroyed. So it's a phenomenon that I think repeats itself, and so I was glad to be there, and I think it's worth looking at this not as like the Beanie Baby, look at that fad, but like what can we learn for the next time this happens?
Which was funny how we had those people kind of self-satirizing themselves, having a fake Picasso and a fake, Warhol. It's like those are all people who put the world on their head. People did not like them.
Yeah.
People still don't like them.
Yeah.
Some of them don't. Particularly when Picasso changed everything and started doing the blue period, started doing, with all the angles. Like, people don't like that. People did not like him for that.
Yeah.
And
One of the main comparisons is just photography in general was not considered, just like cryptocurrency was not considered a medium for art. Photography was not considered art. It was a sort of tool of productivity of all kinds, and it was much, much later that anybody considered the idea that a photograph could be a piece of art.
Well, I'm going to leave it right there, and we're going to open up for a few questions if anybody would care to comment on this. And we have a few questions, so we'll go to Cheryl, Nancy, and then you.
So this was a really interesting documentary, and I just have a few quick questions for you. One is, does it make sense that the takeaway is that NFTs are still a pathway for artists who are really producing art and are not wanting to be speculative or greedy? And then the second question is, did you ever encounter in your research, once artists learned that they weren't going to get the royalties or whatever the stream of the word was, did you ever encounter artists who said, well, I'm going to make a contract that if you're a buyer, you do have to pay me some royalties, and anyone who resells my art has to pay royalties, because blockchain is also used for contracts?
Yeah, great questions. The first point, many of these artists are still experimenting with NFTs and still making money from NFTs, even now. Those cartoon monkeys are not worth $100,000 anymore, but they're still worth like $10,000, and it's very possible that they might be worth something again. In terms of the overall, an artist entering this economy right now, you can only do it by having a very large following already at this point, which is another, what's a whole other topic. But in terms of the royalties thing, you're exactly right. There's artists who built their own NFT marketplaces that enforce contracts. And this is really technical. I don't think, it was hard to get this concept across fully, but you're exactly right. There are people now using the technology to enforce royalties, taking the power away from those marketplaces.
Because it's like a flow through copyright in a way, because you originated. You can't copyright an idea, but you can copyright a piece of art, and so that it's a piece of that, and there's a percentage. I think it came through a little bit, but yeah, it's hard. It's a hard concept.
There's some cool experiments going on with film royalties. We didn't end up doing it with this because the market has now crashed, and there needs to be people that actually buy and value these things in order for any of this to work. Some of the collectors were really doing it to support artists, and others were doing it to get rich, and that's exactly the same in the traditional.
They should buy your film.
They should
put it on blockchain.
Exactly. They can distribute royalties.
It's great. Let's rip up everybody.
Yeah. We never. There's been some cool experiments with film NFTs. There's been people who've sold their trailer as an NFT and made a lot of money doing that. We've got it done.
And that could fund the film, right?
Yeah, it's happened. It's happened.
That's a really great concept. Filmmakers, you that out there? I mean, it's a good concept.
Yeah. We'll see if it becomes viable again, but I think that it very well might. And the broader, I think, thing to look at is what are the new tools that are ethical that are being made, and how can they be deployed by artists? Because I think artists a lot of these artists really did take risks. At the beginning, it wasn't just like sure money bet. They experimented with really crazy stuff.
And there's your regulation conversation.
Yes.
So who was next? You.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you for making this film. First of all, I know very little about this, so it's very educational.
You know a little now or before you?
Yes. So I'm always glad to hear about potential ways for artists to make money, because life Can I ask two questions? One of them is, it took a long time for the topic of, is this notion of value beyond the monetary value, like, oh, is it a good piece of art, right? Is it something that says something? It took a long time for the film to introduce that concept, and I'm thinking, how do artists feel about, and I know they're responsible at bottom, but how do they feel about their work, like basically merely being looked at as having monetary value? Like for them, of course, it's good, but then it's like it's this thing that's not really art. It's just something that has some imaginary value. So that's.
Or does it?
Or does it?
Who are you to say? If you buy, I mean, it's how you value it.
Yes.
Well,
Anybody. Who's you being anybody.
It is, but there's a certain, it's like it's so intangible in relation to other forms of art that it has this sort of extra questionability to it. I don't know, collectors are always, collecting because they want to make money, or eventually sell their art. But a lot of them really love the art that they're buying. Traditional collectors. Do these collectors? They're not even really called collectors, they're traders, right?
There's a mix of motivations. Like Adam Lindemann, the guy that we showed, is a traditional art collector. He has a very well-known gallery in the Upper East Side. He actually owns a Basquiat and Andy Warhol, and he loves Beeple's work and thinks Beeple is today's Andy Warhol. And he has a digital screen with his NFT of Beeple next to his Basquiat in his gallery. And others could argue that couldn't you just everybody make a copy and put a digital screen of that same work in their thing? But also, like Jonathan Berger and other art people have made the point that actually since the advent of mechanical reproduction, artwork can be reproduced. And what does it matter if you have the original one or one made in China, etc.? So I think, the point is that value has always been extremely subjective, as you were saying, Aaron. And I think for the most part, for a lot of the artists we profiled were really young artists. There were many stories we couldn't follow. There's already like way too many people in this movie. And it was really hard. That was the most difficult part of it. We cut a lot of artists out.
How much footage do you have? How many hours?
We shot like 100 days, so maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot, too much. So it's maybe like, yeah, and what happened was there was kind of a winnowing process where we if the arc of the film ended up becoming this kind of 2-year chronology, sort of divided into the seasons of the market. And so it was the artists that had interesting emotional reactions to that changing tides that we stayed with, while other ones sort of got relegated to smaller kind of archetypes. Like he's 15, that's crazy. Let's keep him in the film because that's interesting. But there was a lot of people that got cut, and I do think for a lot of these young artists, the idea that the NFT technology hyper financialized their work was great, and was what attracted them to it, because they didn't know anything about it. They didn't know anything about traditional art galleries or how any of that would work. And that's what this technology does, is it liquidifies everything into pure money. And again, just to reiterate for the folks who are just thinking about the art NFT thing, this whole blockchain thing is not going anywhere. Bitcoins are worth $110,000 each right now. NFTs are down, but they're all-time high today. And the reason why I emphasize this is not because I think that's a good or bad thing, as the film argues, it probably should be regulated. It's just not something that should be dismissed. And I think at minimum, and what I hope the film contributes to, is people understanding that the idea that there is a global network of code that connects everybody and can allow people to transfer value from one to another is very, very powerful, both for good or for evil. And I think it's important just to be educated about that. And this art version is the part of it that interested me more than the money part of it.
And there you go. Thank you for tying that in. So it starts with the individual artist story. It's the why, the individual artist. How are you? I think you were kind of trying to get to that, Nancy, a little bit. Is that where's the end, and how is it going to benefit me, and not just as art value of art, but as a commodity, as an entrepreneur, and the fact that perhaps, I mean, when did we just start tapping our phones, right?
Yeah.
When did that start happening? Not too long ago. Just a couple of years ago, if you think about it. When did we have phones? Just a couple of years ago. So, I mean, let's just think about that for a reason and how technology increases. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of blockchain.
I feel like we used to bump our phones like back in the day,
Yeah.
and then like went away for a long time, and now it's bad.
Well, remember Blackberries were all around too. That was the thing. That was never going to die.
So
What happened?
NFTs
We were Palm Pilots. We were Palm Pilots. That was never going to die.
Yeah.
Okay, listen.
I loved my BlackBerry, I just say. Right. First of all, just congratulations. What an amazing accomplishment that is. And so I learned a lot, you know, because I kind of knew a little of this, but I learned a lot. But what I was really also wondering is if you could tell us just a little bit about the process. I mean, there were so many moving pieces and multiple camera crews and over a course of years, and how that, like, you were there at that Christie's auction. I mean, like, it was just like, some of it seemed like serendipity. Obviously, some of it was very planned.
Yeah.
But were you working on other projects simultaneously?
Yeah, so the 100 days, the film was pretty distributed. So like by way of example, I went to Cuba, but I did not go to Nigeria. I had some local producers and crew do the Nigeria shoot remotely, and so that I got fed through the camera. That's how a lot of stuff gets made now during COVID. You can like get a really good feed, and I'm really all about, if you're working closely with one subject, you want to be there all the time. And that applied a lot of the time. Like Latasha was in LA, and I had a really trusted team that would like, oh, things were happening with her music video. She's dropping the new video. I just sent a local crew, and I'd be on the phone to ask her a couple of questions. So that made it possible to do something so sprawling, because otherwise, yeah, if I was, I think I was probably physically at half of those, and a lot of them, because we didn't know who our main subjects were, we were just like, oh, we really need to be at that thing, at that moment. Can we have one videographer there? And unfortunately, I think that makes the movie look a little like all over the place. It's not that visually coherent, but I'm not one to, we tried to make the interviews themselves extremely standardized in this kind of like wide frame, so that the experts grounded the film aesthetically, while the characters were kind of this mess of footage and styles from all over the place, and archival music videos and digital art and grids. There's a lot of like different assets, and then there's all like the really cool old 90s graphics. So the movie's like a really big collage of a lot of things, and I think most of what you're asking about really happened in post-production, where we figured out what the story was, and that took a really long time. We edited the movie for like 10 months, I would say.
One last question. You had it.
Yeah,
You go.
piggybacking on that, how were you there when people got his money? I mean, that was such a fly in the wall experience. Also, were there obstacles to get into Cuba, and how were you at the Christie's auction?
All right, only one question. We got to get out of here.
It's all logistics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just documentary magic. I guess it's, well, how can I answer the question? Well, I think that what you want to do, it goes back to what I said before, which is finding really great people that you trust to be your eyes and ears, and to build. Documentary filmmaking is really about intimate relationship and trust building with these people, from the woman in Cuba to Beeple and his family and others, and to get the buy-in that what you're ultimately going to be making aligns with what they think is happening in their life. And it's a very sensitive process, and a lot of these artists really wanted the exposure, and they were happy to have a crew there, but they were also very cautious about, oh, am I going to be in that NFT scam documentary where I look like a rube or whatever? And so my process is to really try to be with people as much as possible without cameras before filming, to try to build that trust and access, and have a lot of conversations with people. And then when you're able to do that, you're able to kind of be in the right place at the right time, or you just sneak in to Christie's and don't tell anybody anything, because they will not.
But you don't tell anybody, then standing there.
You take a camera that kind of looks like a DSLR, like sort of like that, but you put the microphone in your jacket pocket, and you only put the long lens and the mic on when you get into the auction room and it's too late. So you don't walk in with the camera built.
Tricks of the trade.
Well,
And on that note, there's plenty more Nicholas could tell you, and I just want to send, I think we all should show our appreciation if we haven't yet for Nicholas and his wonderful work. What a fascinating topic and a fantastic film by Nicholas Bruckman. Thanks to Nicholas for being so honest and open in that great conversation, and for joining me at the film festival. What a great opportunity to share more about this incredible topic. So this includes a very special edition of an Inwood Film Festival post-screening conversation podcast. Again, it's Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where you meet the musicians, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home here in upstate Manhattan. Many thanks to Grayson Horn for recording the interview, and to HideSites.com for uptown promotional support. You can support On Air, by the way, and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation to inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. Be sure to follow us on social media to keep all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Alfresco, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. And Inwood Art Works programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.